Welcome into the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, a podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Welcome to the Pelicans Podcast. I am Joe Cardosi, joined by the chokehold-wielding Jim Eichenhofer. I'm excited today, especially now. I walked in. I was met with a vice grip chokehold right when I walked in, and I was like, and he very subtly told me, shh, go sleep. And indeed I did. But when I woke up, Jim had so much research done. He had a great guest lined up, David Wesley, who we're going to talk to. And in the end, I think we all learned something and laughed a little.
No doubt, Joe. I just needed some time to, concentrate. Like you said, I was doing research. I just figured it would be good to kind of take you out of the equation for a little while. I didn't want you to be distracting me from all the numbers I was crunching.
Yeah, I
and
all
of the detail, the film I was breaking
There's
down.
There's math to do. There's many devices in here.
The fact that you were out cold for a solid, half hour or so.
Yeah, sorry for snoring.
That made it a lot easier for me to get to where we needed to be on the podcast
And
today.
you know what? We're just tinkering with the podcast. That might be how we start off every Wednesday.
Why not?
Who knows?
It was fun for me.
Western Conference Wednesday. And again, Jim had a lot of fun. A lot of people laughed. The people in the office were just pointing. Down he goes. Down he goes. It's about time I shut up for a little while because, man, we've got so much Jim-formation to get to. I am so excited that we're able to walk in here talking about a win when, I got to be honest, a lot of people may have chalked up last night's game as a loss ahead of time. You're facing the Mavs. You're facing the dreaded Luka Doncic. And, different story coming into this one. It seemed like there were times it got a little close, but the Pelicans were always able to keep a good pad and pull away at the end.
Yeah, Sunday was discouraging, no doubt. Yeah. And you're playing the same team again. It seemed like Luka and Kyrie got whatever they wanted in Sunday's game offensively. They were getting tons of open shots. They were setting other people up for easy baskets all over the place. So, I could see how people were like, oh, boy, here comes another game against this Mavericks team.
Yes.
But I did think that the Pelicans were going to respond in some way. And, they more than met those expectations and exceeded them. Took a 33-point lead at one point in I think it was the late third quarter. The final score was actually almost misleading that it was 131-110, that the Pelicans won by 21 because they were up 29 at the end of the third quarter. Pelicans cooled off a little bit with, some of the second, third string in the game at the end.
Hey, guess if Graf got nervous during that stretch. Just guess. Oh, he was nervous.
Are you?
He was very. People were like, "There's no way he got nervous during that game." We were chuckling in the studio because Graf kept going. There it is.
Later we're going to talk about Jordan Hawkins' NBA record. That might be a radio record that you're up by 30 points and you still get a little jumpy and jittery.
It's never enough for Graf. He'll always find a way to get nervous. That's why he is a look. Graf is super entertaining on the radio broadcast. We encourage you to listen to all of them, but we were able to pull that one away. And, another good part of that game, Naji Marshall, such a good identity guy. We've talked about it before, but, Naji may not be a highly touted, maybe just a casual NBA fan name to know, but to this Pelican squad, he's so important.
Yeah, and I think when people look through stats, especially if you're a person who doesn't follow the Pelicans closely, it's easy to look at the injury list and be like, well, CJ McCollum's out. That's huge. Oh, Herb's out, that's important, but, he only averages, 8 points a game or whatever it is. Oh, Naji, he's a bench guy that averages a few points a game. Yeah. Like, that's not that big of a deal. But then when you see Herb make his return to the lineup and you see Naji, this was his second game that he's played after he had missed the entire season prior to this series against Dallas.
Yeah.
You see these two guys against the Mavericks and what they did defensively. The Mavericks shot 42% from the field. They turned the ball over 20 times. I'm sure to them it felt like about 50 times.
Yes.
But you see the impact that Herb and Naji make and in that game, and you realize like how much more there is to basketball than just the scoring part of it.
Yeah.
Now, Herb had 19 points and Naji had 16 points, so they actually did that too in the game against Dallas. But I think more to the point as far as how and why the Pelicans were able to win this game and win it by a convincing margin was just defensively was so much better than the game on Sunday. And I think Herb in the lineup Tuesday, not in the lineup Sunday, obviously that's a huge factor.
Yeah.
And then Naji getting his second game, just getting into more of a rhythm and more just getting used to being back on the court.
Yeah, it seems like it just changes the entire identity of this team in these little wrinkles and little ways. You just cannot push the Pelicans around when those two guys are on the floor. It's great to see Herb's offensive game developing in front of our eyes. I mean, we've long known Herb to be a defensive stalwart, somebody that you know is going to produce on that end of the floor. But it seems like his entire game is blossoming in front of our eyes. What seems like quickly, I know he's been here for a while, but it just seems like it came out of nowhere. Obviously, he's been putting in a lot of work, but man, what an added bonus having Herb on the floor and able to score.
Yeah, how about 19 points that I mentioned on only 6 for 8 from the field? So he only took 8 shots but scored 19 points.
Yeah.
He had a couple. I've been noticing this since really training camp in the summer, that his finishing skills around the basket are getting better and better. He had a couple, I think, reverse layups or just crafty stuff where he did an up and under move and got right to the rim and banked it at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And he was 2 for 4 on threes last night, and one of his 3-pointers, the Mavericks were kind of playing under the screen a little bit. They were giving him a little bit of room to operate. So he just takes a couple dribbles and shoots a 3. And I think what was significant about that to me is that I don't have the exact data, but by far the vast majority of the threes that he's taken over his 3 seasons, he's spotted up in the corner or somewhere along the 3-point line.
Yeah.
He's left open. The ball's swung to him. All he has to do is just catch and shoot it.
Right.
But in this case that I referenced from last night, he actually shot a pull-up 3, which to me is evidence of just the confidence that he's gaining.
Right.
I feel like it's something that he wouldn't have even tried to do before.
Yeah.
But now he's at the point where he's like, if you're going to just leave me open, I'll just take a couple dribbles and launch this 3 and swish it from the top of the arc. So just a lot of good signs, like you said. I mean, he's getting better and better all the time. And as Zion mentioned after the game too, defensively he's improving, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's insane.
Based on how he's done so far.
Well, yeah, like you said, Herb stays within his game. He's never been one to get outside of his wheelhouse. And for him to be taking those shots consistently sort of shows you that is in his wheelhouse. Now, I don't think he would be just jacking up shots. He's not Jordan Hawkins. He's not getting, pull the trigger, pull the trigger, pull the trigger.
Right.
If he is taking those shots, he's confident in them. And for that to be added to his game, I mean, he just seems like a perennial all-star in my eyes. Speaking of perennial all-stars in my eyes, our guest today is David Wesley of Bally Sports. We are so excited to have him on board because he is a man who played the guard position. We've got a lot of guard questions for him. And Jim, I don't want to say you grilled him, but man, you got some great info out of David Wesley, and great guest today.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was traveling with the Pelicans, I always used to grill him on the bus between when we would land in some city. We'd always have, 20, 30-minute bus ride to the hotel.
Right.
And so at 1 or 2 a.m., I would be like, all right, tell me about this and tell me about that. And
He's got this sleep mask on trying to ignore you.
Right. To his credit, he never was like, go away, you loser.
Yeah.
So, no, he was always very accommodating. I had so many great conversations with him at 1 and 2 a.m. in Minneapolis and Indianapolis and you name the city.
That's the dream of a lot of people, to be able to chat basketball with David Wesley in the wee hours of the morning. Hop in with us, will you? With Mr. David Wesley of Bally Sports. Joining us on the Pelicans podcast. Always glad to see his smiling face, especially after a big Pels W that, I got to say, Jim, filled me up to the brim. Mr. David Wesley, you can catch him on every Bally's broadcast. David, I know you're out and about. You're a busy man. Feels good to be walking on sunshine after a win, huh?
It is, and what a win it was. And, in the, second game of the in-season tournament for the Pelicans, they go out and, after not playing so well a few days ago, decided to come out and play some of their best basketball this season.
Yeah, I think you put it very generously when you said not playing so well in Sunday's game.
That was kind.
That was for sure. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I wanted to ask you kind of right off the bat, David, is, obviously you played a bunch of years in the NBA. You had to go up against some of the, elite scoring shooting guards. And so I wanted to talk about what the Pelicans did defensively against Luka Doncic last night. I mean, he goes 5 for 16 from the field. has 8 turnovers. He might have had double-figure turnovers, but he didn't play in the fourth quarter because the game was so out of reach. I mean, how impressive was it to see what they were able to do, especially when you contrast it with how easily he was getting everything Sunday night?
Well, how easily he gets things in his career so far. He makes it look the simplest out there, like he's playing with 8th or 9th graders.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. So when you're able to get him off his game, which doesn't seem to happen a ton, that's a heck of a feat. And especially when you talk about sometimes you play that good hard half, and then all of a sudden they come out in the second half and have this monster second half. Well, they stayed at him. They kept, he got a couple of buckets, which obviously he's going to do, but they made everything tough, which is what you want to do. They stayed physical, and I got to give it to the officials. They're not giving him all that flopping and throwing around and giving him foul calls like they've done in the past. So that was to the Pelicans' advantage, and that might be one of the most complete games versus Luka versus the Mavericks and just overall basketball this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because it just reminded me there were 2 or 3 times last night I was sitting next to our guy Will Guillory of The Athletic, and there was 2 or 3 times with Luka, and then a couple other times I think with other Mavericks players where I leaned over him and I was like, man, I'm glad the referees didn't bail him out on that play. Grant Williams had a couple of those too where he kind of launched himself or just kind of leaned in a direction and said, I have no chance of making the shot, but I'm going to draw the foul. And the referees were like, no, you're not going to draw the foul. You're going to have to just run back on defense. So, I was wondering too from your career, who
his
were
illustrious career, Jim.
Sorry, I should have put that in there.
Okay, good.
Who are some of the? I feel like some of these might be obvious, but who are some of the toughest guys that you had to defend from your era of 2 guards that you went into the game and saying like, man, I have to really be on top of it tonight to be able to keep this guy in check.
That was a physical era.
Yeah, MJ, Kobe, Iverson. Those would probably be the toughest 3 probably in the game.
That might be ever
and it was,
in any era.
Yeah. right. And those were games where you knew you weren't going to stop the guy individually. It's a collective effort. People being on a string, understanding, communicating, making sure that we have all eyes on the main target. And I think that's what they did a good job of. They crowded him. They were physical. They bumped him. They helped appropriately and and played with high hands, active hands. A lot of deflections that they won't get credit for, but a lot of deflections last night made it difficult for the Mavs as a team to move the basketball.
You mentioned the team defensive effort, and that's kind of what's required to have Luka end up with the night that he had 16 points on 16 shots,
pedestrian,
in the bunch of turnovers. As a player, beyond the team defensive part too, the Pelicans obviously in the last couple games have gotten 2 guys back that had been out with injuries between Herb Jones and Naji Marshall. I guess starting with Herb, what are some of the things as a player that you look at and say are the most impressive parts about what he's able to do defensively, or just what makes him a guy? I think people are already saying like, man, this guy might be headed for first team all defense this year.
Well, I think his energy level, a lot of players, and I'm talking all generations, if your offense isn't going or you're missing shots or you're not playing well on that end of the floor, you lose energy playing on the defensive end. Whereas Herb is a defensive minded player. He is coming in the game to play defense. So whether he's making shots or missing shots, he tends to play at that high level, knowing that he's guarding the best or second best player for the other team. He brings that energy each and every night. And I think that's what was so special about getting him back and Naji is those are your effort energy guys. Those are your guys that are going to defend and going to play offense with a high basketball IQ, which means being in the right places, spacing properly, cutting when necessary. So, I think that's where Herb, really doesn't get enough credit because one, he he defends like that every night, but also offensively, like last night, he can give you what you need.
Well, I think a lot of people, it was easy to catastrophize last night, Pelicans fans, because there was Willie Green having to sit out, still dealing with some injuries. Jordan Hawkins, we love the hot streak he's on, but he's still young. You don't know what you're going to get out of him night to night. What do you think, that maybe a lot of casual fans may not have seen, that you saw out of this Pelican squad that went into a tough game against a tough opponent with a lot of adversity sort of facing the squad? What did you see out of this Pelican squad that may give Pelicans fans heart as the schedule doesn't get any easier going forward?
Well, I think what everybody's been waiting to see is that Pelican team, that rowdy, flying around, deflections, up and down the floor, playing with pace. We've been looking for that team for this year, looking for a little offensive continuity, getting into the defense more consistently. What I think we saw last night was, okay, there's the glimpse. There's what we've been looking for. How can they sustain it for more than a quarter, more than a half? Can they get a couple of games together? Because this is relatively the same team as last year that at one point, rose to the top of the conference. So where is that team? And hopefully seeing last night's game is a prelude to what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, that reminded me for sure of them at their peak the last couple of years, whatever moments where, last season, top of the West in December. The year before that, by the end of that playoff season when they played Phoenix, they were playing at a level that was really dangerous and tough.
Yeah, I mean, you play like that, you're not scared of anybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
Joe mentioned Jordan Hawkins. Obviously you came into the league playing that position as well. Totally different circumstances. You carved out a long career undrafted. Jordan Hawkins was a lottery pick, albeit the 14th pick. It wasn't like he was top 3 or top 5. But, I mean, based on what you've seen so far in the first, 11 games of his career, what has stood out to you the most about him and what has impressed you as far as the impact that he's been able to make so quickly?
Well, just his confidence, his aggressiveness. I mean, it's one thing to want to shoot those shots, but his confidence to make those shots has been really nice, because that's the one thing that you struggle with a little bit when you go from college to pro is sometimes your confidence. You're not sure. Things are faster, quicker. People are stronger, jump higher, longer. In college, you may beat your guy and shoot over a guy protecting the rim that's 6'5". Now you have a 6'10" and a 7-footer, trying to block shots. So the fact that he can come in this league and absolutely play with such poise and confidence and really be a person and a player that you have to get minutes to because of just his ability to take advantage of the situation. Would he be there ordinarily this early in the season? Maybe not, but he got his opportunity, and, man, I've loved to watch him, the way he's taking advantage of it.
We've seen the stat that's been talked about, especially the last couple of games, about how he has the most three-pointers made in the first 10 games of a career and now 11 games of a career.
Keeps adding on and on.
Do you ever look back do you ever look at this era and say, man, I wish when I came into the league, teams were okay with guards taking, 10, 12 threes a game?
I think about it all the time because it would be a lot of fun to just be out there just letting it ride. I mean, it doesn't seem like there is a bad shot in the NBA anymore. I mean, guys shoot 45-footers. They shoot guarded shots. And I feel like I had a sense of a good shot. So I could see me having a good time out here shooting threes. And he's probably shot more threes than I did my whole first year.
Yeah. Already. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much has it changed as far as, maybe 15, 20 years ago where a guy took a shot that was kind of iffy and the coach was like, all right, man, you're coming out of the game, compared to what it is now?
Yeah. I mean, it's totally different. I mean, the shot selection mattered, 15 years ago, whereas now it matters, but I they're encouraging those shots. I don't know. I don't know what the gray area is or what the determination of is that a good shot or a bad shot.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what the metrics are anymore. I have no idea what the analytics that they're ingesting now, where they're like, just take them. But it definitely seems like the trigger is being pulled a lot more than it used to be back in your day.
Well, in my day, first 4 or 5, they were allowed to take questionable shots.
Yeah.
Whereas now it seems like any and everybody that goes out on the court can do that.
Yeah. I don't remember a lot of logo shots from when I first started watching basketball where there was a guy that had a foot at
a
couple
like the All-Star game or halftime thing.
Yeah.
Those are buzzer beaters.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things I was wondering about too for you is, I mentioned the stat about Hawkins, most threes made in it to start a career. I mean, I was wondering, if you played in this era, do you think maybe you'd be up there near the top of that list as far as threes to start a career?
You know what? I don't know, because I didn't come into the league with that kind of, being undrafted and really trying out and trying to hang on, latch on. And of course, in my era, they weren't encouraging, get up some shots.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think I would even be anywhere close to that.
Right.
But it'd be nice to see.
I was about to say, man, you're still looking young. You still look like you could cross me and Jim up for sure, along with a bunch of you could still make your return, man. Medical science is always making advancements. I just want to see Wesley back out there on the court jacking up half-court shots.
Well, I tell you, Joe, I guarantee you there's been times over the last couple of years when, based on the number of injuries, that there's been tons of people that have come up to David and before games and during games and been like, dude, you still got something left in you?
Looking spry.
Some eligibility left. Absolutely not.
I was about to say, once you start putting a touch of gray in your beard, I think it's over. I've been there for a long time. Man, always fun to talk basketball with you. Always fun to talk some good Pels news, especially with you. Thanks for hopping on, Mr. David Wesley. Check him out on Every Valley's broadcast. Check him out online. Always great insight. Thanks again, man.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good day.
Great stuff there from David Wesley. What a ray of sunshine he is, sometimes in the darkness, but especially on what is not outside a bright, shiny day, but feels in Pelicans world like a bright, shiny day. Great talk with David Wesley. And Jim, I'm looking up at the calendar, and sometimes I forget what day of the week it is, but oh my goodness, it is Western Conference Wednesday. Holy goodness!
Yes, Joe, and I'm excited for this one because as we talked about in the first couple weeks of the season, my team to watch for Western Conference Wednesday. The first week was Oklahoma City. They went undefeated. The next week it was Minnesota. I think they went 3-1, but they knocked off Boston and Denver, handing those teams their first two losses.
Good basketball.
So I felt like my performance was very disappointing, and I vowed to you. I said, Joe, I haven't been great at picking teams that I want to see, decline and have some rough times. So I was starting to worry if I was like the reverse jink, that if I pick you, you're going to suddenly dominate the NBA.
Yeah.
But guess what? I did much better this past week, Joe.
Yes.
My third Western Conference team to watch was the LA Clippers. Mm-hmm. Right after they made the James Harden trade, they have lost every game since then.
Okay, yes.
And during the week in question, the 7-day period in question, they lost at Brooklyn by 7. Mm-hmm. They lost at Dallas in-season tournament game by 18. Ooh. They lost to the Grizzlies, who are struggling big time on their own, by 4 at home. And then they lost at Denver in-season tournament game last night by 3. So I think the game against the Grizzlies on Sunday afternoon was really the one that made people around the league say, we know things they're having tough times with incorporating Harden, but come on.
Yeah.
What the heck? You just lost to the Grizzlies, who have, 15 players out, and they're trying to put together
hard for the Grizzlies right now.
Right, yeah. And so just a rough week for the Clippers. I would like to think that I had some role in that.
I'd like to as well.
And so that was my team to watch last week. Now, can I make it 2 solid weeks in a row?
Let's go.
That's the question.
Let's roll the dice.
My fourth of the season team to watch in the Western Conference is the dreaded Houston Rockets, who handed the Pelicans a frustrating, brutal loss in the first in-season tournament game the Pelicans probably could have, should have won. Didn't get. But the reason I picked Houston is, at the time, I think when the Pelicans lost to them, people were like, you lost to Houston? They're not that good. Like, Come on, what are you doing? But the Rockets have actually won 6 games in a row, and they still will have that winning streak intact when they begin their schedule over the next few days. And so they have 3 games between now and the next time we convene for Western Conference Wednesday.
And we shall convene.
Yes, indeed. Friday they play at the Clippers. Kind of an ironic tie-in there.
Yeah.
Not intentional, but I like the way it kind of comes together.
Get 'em.
Sunday they're at the Lakers. Another game where, we'll probably be okay with if the Rockets win that one, but
sure.
That's a different conversation. And then they finish out Monday at Golden State. So the Rockets are 3-game West Coast trip at the 2 LA teams at Golden State on Monday. Pretty daunting, pretty difficult schedule, but I mean the way the Rockets are playing, I'm sure they're going into this saying like, we can win some of these games. We've won 6 in a row. Let's keep it going.
Yeah.
So this will be a good test when we come back to see whether the Rockets are still red hot the way they have been, or whether they kind of got sidetracked a little bit with some of these road games against
juicy
quality teams.
Western Conference Wednesday, man. It is such a win. This is a jam-packed Wednesday because also another thing, Know Your Pelicans was a segment we did during the preseason.
I should explain so people understand the concept a little bit. And we're going to be doing this sporadically throughout the season. I don't know if it's going to be weekly or every couple weeks.
But we feel like partying this week.
Big time. But basically what we did was we had our good friend Aaron Summers go through and ask the players questions. We didn't get the entire roster, but we got the vast majority of them.
Yeah.
And we asked them questions about their teammates. So these are all going to be kind of one question that we asked a group of players. I think in this case it may have been about 10 or 12 guys that answered the question. The question for the first one of Know Your Pelicans is, if you're in trouble, which teammate would you call first to help? So we sorted through the responses, we tallied up the answers, and basically, I put a poll on X this morning asking people if they could guess correctly, which player on the team got the most responses or the most mentions in terms of this is the guy that I would call first if I was in a jam or if I was in trouble.
A lot of dependable Pelicans. I mean, I feel like that's a hard decision to make.
And we're going to post the article basically when the poll expires. I think I made it for about 4 hours today. When that 4-hour span is over, I'm going to post the article on Pelicans.com. I'm going to tweet it out, and people are going to be able to see, like, okay, did they get their, were they correct in their guess? Did they know, did you know your Pelicans in terms of the guy that people on the team would call first? And so that's kind of trying to summarize what we're dealing with that. Yeah. But Joe and I also wanted to kind of get involved and participate. Yes. They still don't let you vote on your own polls on X. It's gone through a name change and you still can't vote.
Silly.
So, I mean, you could vote on mine, but I can't vote on my own. So I thought we needed to take the opportunity to give our own answers and responses.
I agree.
So we're going to go through, both of us are going to talk about which player that we would call first if we were in a jam.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to write-in vote you, but apparently it has to be a player that plays on the team, not just someone that's within the organization.
Well, thank you, Joe.
You're my rock. But I got to say, if I had to call one guy, if I was in a jam, I know a popular response were like the dads, Larry Nance, C.J. McCollum. I want someone who's going to get their hands dirty. Give me Naji Marshall. If I could make one phone call from anywhere, hey, man, I'm in the muck, give me Naji, because I know he is willing to do whatever. That's a teammate. He will put his teammates on his back. Yes. And you know what? He's not going to make a polite phone call about it. That's the kind of man I want. A juggernaut for me, Mr. Naji Marshall.
And not to describe you as a combative or belligerent sort, Joe, but I feel like, if you do get into a little pickle, like you said, that
I get into a pickle every now and then.
He'd be the person that would step in, and as we've mentioned before, when there's been little altercations and
kerfuffles
on the court, he's the guy that's standing in the corner on the bench, rubbing his hands together and saying, like, I was born for this.
Exactly.
I can't wait.
Exactly.
I can't wait to get into
when
this.
I'm really in it, you'll find me sometimes, playing that game where you have your hand out and you're doing the knife in between the fingers, and then you lose a bet. I want Naji Marshall helping me out in those situations. Not that I get into it all the time, but every now and then. So, yeah, Naji's my guy, and I feel like if you're a rough and tumble sort, Naji's got to be your man.
Definitely. And you know what, Joe? It's going to be really difficult for me to follow that with my response to who I would call.
I know you're
especially
a rough and tumble
since
sort.
Mine is much more tame than yours, but I'm going to go with Larry Nance Jr. And there's actually several reasons for that. One of them is I think he's a very friendly, like personable, down-to-earth guy. So I feel like if my name popped up on the cell phone of a player, that I would give him a good chance of being like, oh, it's Jim, I'll answer this. Whereas, some of the other guys might be like, and not maybe just an attack on me, but just in general might be like, I'm not answering this guy's phone call.
Work.
Yeah, and if I texted and said, I'm in trouble, they might be like, well, handle this on your own.
Good luck, fam.
But no, I think Larry is he's a normal guy. Like when you talk to him,
he just seems like he'd be like, how can I help?
Right.
Oh my goodness.
And he doesn't seem like, a multi-million-dollar pro athlete. He seems like like a down-to-earth person that would be willing to help you out. I also think he's really intelligent too.
Yes.
And so
he knows a lot about a lot.
Right. I wanted to pick somebody who, regardless of the situation, like if I had a flat tire or if I was lost somewhere in Louisiana and didn't know how to get out of it, whatever the situation, I feel like he's
these are the
multidimensional.
situations you imagine yourself in trouble. Like, oh no, I took a bit of a wrong turn. My back's against the wall in an alley with a stick trying to fend people off. I guess we just get into different stuff, man. That's just us.
Yeah, that's what makes it great. But yeah, he's my pick. I think there's a few other players that I would have considered. CJ McCollum. I think one of the players mentioned that they picked CJ because he knows a lot of people.
Yeah.
So basically covering, we didn't really specify of which kind of trouble we were asking about. I think one of the players mentioned CJ because they felt like he has like a phone Rolodex of all these different types of people. Like if you're in a money jam, he can talk to, some CEO. He
can cover a lot of broad situations.
Right.
I feel like this is a Rorschach test of each person. Like, hey, if you were in trouble, who would you call? What type of trouble they think of tells you a lot about each person.
For sure.
And I think the answers reflect that. A lot of responsible people choose C.J. McCollum and Larry Nance. I think if I were in a panic, Larry Nance would be able to talk me down. Hey, man, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, he's a reasonable fellow.
Yeah, he's got a smooth, dulcet tones, just like you, Jim. But again, you are my number one. I have one contact on my phone. I have wife. I have the hospital. 3, and Jim. That's it. That's all I need, really.
And by the way, speaking of phone and contacts information, I thought it was funny when I listened through all of the clips from the interviews that a few of the guys basically made their selection based on who would actually answer the phone. I think a lot of them were, that was like the entire answer for a few of them. They were like, I'm going to pick Darian Sebron because he would actually pick up.
He'll answer the phone.
Right.
It shows a lot. It showed a lot of fun inter-team dynamics because we all know that guy. I love him, but I'm not answering the phone. Not after 10. So that was fun. Great stuff from Mr. Jim Eichenhofer. Always feet to the pavement, doing the dirty work. He's our Naji Marshall here on the podcast. And big thanks to you for listening to the Pelicans podcast. Get out there. Tell your friends and pals, hey, listen to it. Get the grocery clerk. He's like, hey, and nice weather outside. Listen to the Pelicans podcast. Just tell them. We got to get the word out there however we can. We will talk to you once again on Friday. And until then, go Pels!
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, or you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time right here